A dentist actually has to become a full-blown biomechanical engineer. We are going to explore exactly how they design and construct a high-stakes, microscopic marvel right inside the human mouth. We're talking about the removable partial denture. Picture it like this. Would you ever willingly drive across a massive suspension bridge that was built without a schematic? Of course not. I mean, you need to know the load-bearing capacities, the exact stress points, all the precise measurements, way before a single piece of steel is even laid down. Well, the human jaw is this incredibly dynamic environment with tremendous forces constantly at play. Replacing teeth requires that exact same level of complex engineering and architectural foresight. Which brings us to the absolute cardinal rule of dental architecture. Absolutely no restorative treatment happens before the removable partial denture, or RPD design, is fully approved. Unless it's a literal emergency, a dentist has to map out the entire design on a surveyed cast first. You can't just start altering teeth or slapping on crowns because every single modification has to perfectly serve that final, meticulously planned structure. Okay, let's just dive right into our spatial journey through the 6 structural phases of RPD design. We've got 1, the blueprint before treatment, 2, minimalism for tissue health, 3, utilizing what is present, 4, engineering stress release, 5, the major connectors, and finally, 6, precision in the draft. Starting us off is Section 1, the blueprint before treatment. This is where we establish exactly why foundational planning is just totally non-negotiable. So just like a surveyor assessing a construction site before digging the foundation, a dentist has a very strict checklist. Before they draw a single line, they have to evaluate intraoral factors. We're talking about frenal attachments, soft tissue undercuts, how compressible the mucosa is, and the exact status of existing restorations. You literally cannot design this using a plaster cast alone. The living, breathing tissue has to dictate the blueprint. Moving right along to Section 2, minimalism for tissue health. Once that site is fully surveyed, we move to the core philosophy of modern framework design. And look at the stark visual contrast here. It's practically night and day. You have an older, bulky plated design covering a massive amount of teeth and tissue compared to a modern, elegant, minimalist framework. This minimalist approach is vastly superior. A truly great engineer minimizes framework elements and avoids that bulky plating whenever possible to keep the whole prosthesis clean and unobtrusive. So what's the actual biological physics behind avoiding that bulk? Well, whenever you stick extra metal near or right over the gingival margins, your gums, you are basically asking for trouble. It increases plaque accumulation, leads to bleeding, causes a loss of tissue attachment, and drastically spikes the risk of root caries, which are cavities right on the tooth roots. In fact, patients actually prefer a minimalist lingual bar over a bulky plate 3-to-1 just because it's so much more comfortable. Long-term periodontal health is the absolute ultimate goal here. All right, Section 3, utilizing what is present. Now that we are fully committed to a minimalist approach, how does a good engineer actually use the existing topography of the mouth to anchor everything? To anchor the denture, we use something called a rest seat. Just think of this as a custom-carved little ledge on an existing tooth, the abutment tooth, that provides essential vertical support. The golden rule here is you have to select a design that perfectly fits the hard and soft tissues, rather than hacking away and unnecessarily altering the mouth. If you already have rest seats or perfectly shaped crowns in there, you use them. You plan for the future, but you build with what you have. And interestingly, the rules for where you place these structural anchors completely shift depending on weight distribution. If the denture is what we call tooth-borne, meaning it's fully supported by teeth on both sides of the gap, you put the rests right next to the empty space. Simple enough. But if it's tissue-borne, where the teeth end and the denture is basically resting on the gums, the physics totally change. You have to place the rest further forward, on the mesial side, the side closest to the front of the mouth, to properly manage the load so you don't end up crushing the underlying tissue. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, engineering stress release. Speaking of managing loads, we've got to create flexible joints, so our remaining abutment teeth aren't just completely wrenched out of place every time the patient chews. Enter the RPI clasp. This is a highly specialized direct retainer system, and honestly, it is the ultimate shock absorber in dentistry. It's engineered specifically for those tricky tissue-borne scenarios we just talked about. Instead of rigidly gripping the tooth and brutally pulling on it when the patient bites down, the RPI clasp is specifically designed to release that stress. You can literally see the mechanics at play here. When downward pressure hits that denture base during chewing, the little eye-shaped bar actually drops down and disengages from the tooth. the entire retainer rotates slightly, which radically cuts down the torque on that crucial anchor tooth. Plus, because it sweeps up from the bottom, it's mostly hidden by the lip, so it looks great aesthetically, and since only the tip touches the tooth, it's incredibly hygienic.
So picking these retainers is basically choosing the exact right load-bearing bracket based on where the missing teeth are. For tissue-borne cases, the RPI is your heavy hitter. For fully tooth-supported gaps, you generally go with a cast circumferential clasp. And the engineering rules, they're incredibly strict. You have to gently curve the metal from the gridwork. You never ever use rigid inflexible L-bars, and you absolutely cannot flatten the retentive tip. Every single millimeter of curvature actually serves a functional mechanical purpose.
Okay, section 5, the major connectors. We have our supports, we have our stress-releasing joints. Now we need to tie this whole biomechanical structure together with massive foundation beams. Now, for a mandibular or lower jaw framework, we generally use a highly preferred lingual bar major connector. Just look at how gracefully it sweeps across the floor of the mouth. It completely avoids any abrupt changes in contour, and crucially, it stays well away from the free gingival margin, that delicate gum tissue surrounding the remaining teeth. That's what ensures optimal blood flow and long-term health. But biology likes to throw roadblocks at us, right? Choosing this foundation beam means navigating those roadblocks. In the lower jaw, you always want that lingual bar, but if the patient has a high floor of the mouth or maybe bony growths called tori, you might actually be forced to use a lingual plate to stabilize everything. Up top in the maxilla, a palatal strop is great for tooth-borne chases, and structurally speaking, you always have to extend those distal bases all the way back to specific anatomical landmarks, like the retromolar pads and hamular notches, just to distribute that bite force as widely as humanly possible. Finally, we arrive at section 6, precision in the draft. We've gathered all the biological data, we picked our anchors, we chose our beams. Now we enter the final phase where all these complex rules culminate in the literal drawing of the schematic. The dentist has to follow this exact sequential algorithm to make sure absolutely no structural element clashes with another. First up, you select the specific mathematical path of insertion, literally how the denture will slide into place. Then, you lock in the rest positions. Third, you pick those stress-releasing direct retainers. Fourth, you plot your major connector beam. And finally, you draw the minor connectors that link it all together. It has to be done in this exact order. No skipping ahead.
And all of that builds into the final product, the blueprint itself. The dentist meticulously draws this detailed schematic directly onto the surveyed cast. The lab tech, the person who will actually cast the metal, relies entirely on this physical three-dimensional map. There's zero room for guesswork here.
Because of that, the drafting requirements are insanely strict. Absolute accuracy is mandatory. The dentist has to use single, distinct lines, no messy, sketchy pencil marks. And the whole thing is strictly color-coded. Red pencil is used specifically for retentive undercuts and flexible wrought wire, while blue is for all the rigid framework elements. If a dentist draws a sketchy line, the lab might cast a bulky piece of metal that literally crushes a patient's gums. It would be a complete disaster.
It really makes you pause and think about what's actually happening inside a dental clinic. When you have to map out load distribution, engineer stress release, and draft millimeter-perfect structures just to replace a couple of missing teeth, well, it leaves you with a pretty profound question. When human biology demands this level of absolute mechanical accuracy, are we practicing dentistry or are we practicing structural engineering? Definitely something to chew on until next time. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we'll see you on the next one.